The invitation arrived soaked in her father's cologne, the same scent that had haunted her nightmares for 18 years. Alpha Dominic Ashford was finally acknowledging she existed, but only because he needed a warm body to fill a seat at the royal summit. Sarah stood in the narrow doorway of her quarters, the heavy cream envelope trembling in her fingers. She didn't need to open it. The wax seal, that proud crescent moon she'd been forbidden to claim, told her everything. "Well," she whispered to the empty room. He finally remembered. The servants' wing of the Ashford estate smelled of lye soap and old wood, a far cry from the jasmine and polished marble of the main house. Sarah had learned every creak of these floors, every shadow that could hide her when Victoria came looking for someone to blame. 23 years of invisible living had made her an expert at disappearing. She broke the seal. "Your presence is required at the Royal Summit reception. Dress appropriately. Don't embarrass me." No greeting, no signature, just that cold command, as if she were being summoned to clean the silver rather than attend the most important event in a decade. A gold coin slipped from the envelope and clinked against the worn floorboards. One coin, a single, solitary gold piece to purchase a gown fit for an alpha's daughter. Sarah picked it up, turning it over in her palm. The metal caught the fading afternoon light streaming through her small window. One coin wouldn't buy fabric for a hem, let alone a dress. But that was the point, wasn't it? Dominic Ashford never did anything without calculation. He wanted her there looking poor, looking pitiful, looking exactly like the charity case he planned to present her as. "Look at my noble heart," he'd tell the Alpha King. "I took in this poor Omega orphan, raised her despite her mother's shame." Her mother, the Omega servant who'd caught an Alpha's wandering eye and paid for it with her life. Dominic had never spoken of her, not once in all of Sarah's years. Everything she knew about Elena came in whispers from the older servants. That she'd been kind, that she'd been beautiful, that she'd bled out bringing Sarah into a world that would never want her. The bedroom door slammed open. "Still breathing, I see." Lydia Ashford swept into the room like she owned it, which technically she did. Everything in the Crescent Moon territory belonged to the Ashfords, including Sarah, if her half-sister's attitude was any indication. "What do you want, Lydia?" "Father sent me to make sure you understood the invitation." Lydia's perfect blonde curls bounced as she looked around the cramped space with theatrical disgust. "Though I can't imagine why he bothers. The Alpha King won't look twice at an Omega like you." Sarah kept her face blank. 18 years of practice made it easy. "Then why does your father want me there?" "Don't call him that." Lydia's blue eyes, Dominic's eyes, flashed with something ugly. "He's not your father. He's your benefactor. There's a difference." "Of course. How could I forget?" Lydia stepped closer, her designer heels catching on Sarah's threadbare rug. "Listen to me carefully, little Omega. The Alpha King is coming to find his mate. Every unmated female in the territory will be presented. Father needs to show a complete household, and unfortunately, that includes you. As his daughter?" The laugh that came from Lydia was sharp enough to cut. "As his charity project. You're proof of his generous spirit, nothing more." He took in a bastard Omega and gave her a roof over her head. Very noble, very touching. She reached out and flicked the gold coin from Sarah's palm. "That's more than you deserve." The coin rolled across the floor and disappeared under the bed. "Now," Lydia continued, examining her manicure with studied boredom, "Mother has arranged for one of the servants to alter an old gown of mine. Something simple. You'll stand in the back, keep your mouth shut, and if anyone asks, you're grateful for everything the Ashford family has done for you." Sarah's wolf stirred beneath her skin. After years of suppression, the creature inside her had grown quiet, almost dormant. But something about this, the casual cruelty, the calculated humiliation, made the beast want to rise. "And if I refuse?" Lydia's smile was her mother's smile, all ice and venom. "Then Father will finally have the excuse he needs to throw you out. No pack would take you. No Alpha would claim you. You'd be rogue within a week and dead within a month." She paused at the doorway. "Be ready at 7. And do something about your hair." The door clicked shut, Sarah stood motionless for a long moment, listening to Lydia's footsteps fade down the corridor. Then, slowly, she knelt and fished the gold coin from beneath her bed. One coin. She turned it over and over, her mind working through the angles. Dominic wanted her humiliated. Victoria wanted her invisible. Lydia wanted her gone. They all assumed she'd play along, grateful for even this small acknowledgement, this tiny crumb of inclusion. They assumed wrong. Sarah moved to her small dresser, the only piece of furniture she truly owned, and pulled open the bottom drawer. Beneath folded linens and a worn copy of her mother's favorite book lay a small leather pouch. Her savings, 10 years of hoarded tips and bartered favors, coins she'd hidden from Victoria's inspections and Lydia's sticky fingers. It wasn't much, but combined with her father's insulting gift, it might be enough. "If you want a charity case," she murmured, counting the coins, "I'll give you one you'll never forget." The seamstress in the village was old, half-blind, and completely uninterested in pack politics. Mira had been making dresses since before Dominic Ashford was born, and she owed the current alpha nothing but contempt. "You want what now?" The old woman squinted at Sarah across her cluttered workroom. "A dress for the royal summit. Something that makes a statement." "Girl, I've been making statements with fabric for 60 years. What kind of statement are we talking?" Sarah laid her coins on the counter. "The kind that tells the truth." Myra's weathered face creased into a slow smile. "Now that's a statement worth making." She gestured to a chair piled with fabric scraps. "Sit. Tell me everything." So Sarah did. She told Mira about her mother, about the servants' quarters, about 18 years of being told she was less than nothing. She told her about the invitation and the single gold coin, about Lydia's threats and Victoria's hatred. She told her about the Alpha King's visit and Dominic's plan to parade her as proof of his generosity. When she finished, Mira was quiet for a long moment. "Your mother," the old woman finally said, "used to bring me wildflowers every spring, said they reminded her of her village, before she came to the Ashford estate." Mira rose slowly, moving toward a locked cabinet in the corner. "I always wondered what happened to her baby." She returned with a length of fabric that made Sarah's breath catch. It was the deep silver of moonlight on water, shot through with threads that seemed to shift between blue and violet. Simple, elegant, the kind of fabric that didn't need embellishment because it spoke for itself. "This was supposed to be her wedding dress," Mira said quietly. "She ordered it before she found out she was pregnant, before everything fell apart. Kept it. Couldn't bring myself to sell it." Sarah touched the fabric with trembling fingers. "I can't." "You can. And you will." Myra's voice was firm. "Your mother never got to wear it, but her daughter will. And when you walk into that summit, every wolf in that room will see exactly who you are." "Who am I?" The old woman smiled. "That's what we're going to show them." The night of the summit arrived cold and clear, with a full moon hanging heavy over the Ashford estate. Sarah could hear the carriages pulling up to the main house, could smell the mingled scents of 100 different packs gathering for the most important event in a generation. The Alpha King was here. Somewhere in that glittering crowd, the most powerful wolf in 5 territories was looking for his mate. Sarah checked her reflection one final time. The dress fit like it had been made for her because in a way it had been. Mira had worked magic with fabric and thread, creating something that was neither servant's garb nor noble finery. It was simply, devastatingly beautiful. The silver caught the moonlight through her window and seemed to glow. She'd left her dark hair loose, the way her mother wore it in the single portrait she'd managed to find. No jewelry, she had none to speak of, but she didn't need it. The dress was statement enough. A knock at her door made her pulse jump. "Sarah?" It was Agnes, one of the older servants. "They're asking for you in the main hall." "Asking or demanding? Does it matter, child?" "No, didn't." Sarah took one last breath, feeling her wolf stir beneath her skin. For 18 years, she'd hidden. She'd cowered. She'd let them tell her she was nothing, and she'd almost believed it. Tonight, that ended. She opened the door and stepped into the corridor. Agnes's eyes went wide. "Oh, child. You look like my mother?" The old servant nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "Elena would be so proud." Sarah squeezed her hand. "Wish me luck." "You don't need luck." Agnes squeezed back. "You've got something better. You've got the truth." The walk from the servant's wing to the main hall had never felt so long. Sarah could hear music now, the soft strains of the orchestra Victoria had hired from the capital. She could smell expensive perfume and aged wine and the sharp undertone of nervous wolves trying to impress their future king. The doors to the great hall stood open, light spilling across the marble floor. Sarah straightened her spine. If Dominic Ashford wanted a charity case, she'd give him one. But she'd do it on her terms. She stepped through the doors and stopped. Because standing at the center of the room, his dark eyes fixed on the entrance as if he'd been waiting for exactly this moment, was the Alpha King himself. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked carved from granite and moonlight. His nostrils flared, his eyes locked on hers, and Sarah felt something she'd never experienced in her entire life. A pull deep in her chest, like a rope being drawn tight around her heart. "Mate," the word thundered through her blood. The Alpha King took one step toward her, and then Victoria Ashford's crystal champagne glass shattered against the marble floor. Wanting to see what would happen next? Subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. The silence that followed Victoria's shattered glass lasted 3 heartbeats. Then the whispers began. Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, her mother's silver dress catching the candlelight from 1,000 chandeliers. She'd planned to make a statement, to show up in her servant's clothes and expose her father's hypocrisy. But Myra's gift had changed everything. The dress had felt like armor when she'd put it on. Now, under the weight of 100 staring eyes, it felt like a target. And the Alpha King was walking toward her. Every step he took seemed to ripple through the crowd. Wolves parted before him like water, their heads bowing instinctively. He was taller than she'd imagined, broader, with dark hair that brushed his collar and a face that belonged on ancient coins. But it was his eyes that held her captive. Deep amber shot through with gold, fixed on her with an intensity that made her wolf howl. "Mate," the word echoed again, louder this time, and Sarah's breath caught. That couldn't be right. Omegas like her didn't get fated mates. They got arranged marriages to minor pack members, if they were lucky. They got used and discarded, if they weren't. They didn't get kings. "Sarah." Her father's voice cut through the whispers like a blade. "What the hell are you wearing?" Dominic Ashford materialized at her side, his hand clamping around her upper arm with bruising force. Up close, she could see the vein throbbing in his temple, the purple flush creeping up his neck. He was furious, the kind of furious that usually ended with Sarah locked in her room for days. "I'm wearing a dress," she said quietly. "Isn't that what you asked for?" "I asked you not to embarrass me." His grip tightened. "Where did you get this? Did you steal it?" "It was my mother's." Something flickered in Dominic's eyes. Fear? Guilt? It was gone before Sarah could identify it, replaced by cold rage. "Your mother was a servant who died in disgrace. She didn't own anything worth." "Alpha Ashford." The voice came from directly behind Sarah, deep and resonant and carrying enough power to make every wolf in the room instinctively bare their throats. Dominic's hand fell away from her arm as if he'd been burned. Sarah turned. The Alpha King stood less than 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell him. Pine and smoke and something wild that made her wolf whine with longing. His eyes weren't on her father. They were still fixed on her, and up close, she could see the gold spreading through his irises, his wolf pushing to the surface. "Your Majesty." Dominic's voice had transformed from fury to silk. "What an honor. May I present my daughter Lydia?" "You may not." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Sarah watched her father's face cycle through confusion, then offense, then careful neutrality. Behind him, she could see Lydia frozen mid-approach, her diamond-encrusted gown suddenly looking gaudy rather than elegant. "I came to greet the young woman your guards tried to prevent from entering," the Alpha King continued. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but Sarah could feel the power humming beneath it. "I watched from the balcony as she was stopped at the door, as she was questioned, as she was made to show her invitation 3 times before being allowed inside." Dominic's carefully constructed smile faltered. "There must have been some confusion. Sarah is your daughter?" "Yes." The king's gaze finally left Sarah, moving to her father with an intensity that made Dominic take an involuntary step back. "I'm curious why your daughter was treated like an intruder in her own home." The whispers had stopped. The entire ballroom had gone silent, every wolf straining to hear the exchange. Sarah could feel their eyes on her, the curiosity, the speculation, the barely concealed schadenfreude of watching the great Dominic Ashford squirm. "Sarah prefers to keep a low profile." Victoria stepped forward, her recovery from near fainting apparently complete. She placed a possessive hand on Dominic's arm, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "She's rather shy. Aren't you, dear?" The endearment dripped with venom. "Actually," Sarah heard herself say, "I've spent the last 18 years in the servants' quarters. This is the first pack event I've ever been invited to." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's smile froze. Dominic's face went from purple to white, and somewhere behind them, Sarah heard Lydia make a sound like a strangled cat. But the Alpha King simply nodded, as if she'd confirmed something he already suspected. "Then allow me to be the first to welcome you properly." He extended his hand, palm up, the formal gesture of a wolf requesting a dance. "Would you honor me, Lady Sarah?" "Lady." He'd called her lady. Sarah stared at his offered hand, the calluses on his palm, the silver ring on his smallest finger, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. Her wolf was practically clawing at her chest, desperate to accept, to touch, to claim. She swallowed. "I don't know how to dance. No one ever taught me." The admission should have been humiliating, another reminder of everything she'd been denied. But the Alpha King's expression didn't change. "Then I'll teach you." His voice dropped, low enough that only she could hear. "Trust me." She took his hand. The moment their skin touched, something electric shot through Sarah's veins. Her wolf surged forward with enough force to make her gasp, and she saw the king's eyes flash pure gold before he blinked it away. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong and impossibly gentle. "Breathe," he murmured as he led her toward the dance floor. "Just follow my lead." The orchestra, perhaps sensing a cue, began a slow waltz. The crowd parted before them like the Red Sea, nobles and alphas alike pressing back to give them room. Sarah caught glimpses of faces as they passed. Shock, envy, calculation, fury. Her father's expression promised retribution. She didn't care. The king's hand settled on her waist, light but steady. "Place your hand on my shoulder." "Yes, like that. Now, when I step forward, you step back." Simple geometry. "Geometry," Sarah repeated faintly. She was touching the Alpha King, dancing with him, while half the nobility of 5 territories watched and whispered. "I find mathematics soothing in stressful situations." The corner of his mouth quirked. "You're doing well. I'm stepping on your feet. I've survived worse." Despite everything, the staring crowd, her father's rage, the complete insanity of the moment, Sarah felt her lips twitch. "Have you? Survived worse than my dancing? I mean, once, I was ambushed by assassins while bathing. Had to fight them off with nothing but a bar of soap and sheer determination." He guided her through a turn, his movements smooth enough to compensate for her fumbling. "Your dancing is significantly less life-threatening." A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Immediately, she pressed her lips together, but the king was smiling now. A real smile that softened the harsh lines of his face. "There," he said quietly. "That's better." They danced in silence for a moment, the music swelling around them. Sarah gradually relaxed into his hold, letting her body follow where he led. It was easier than she'd expected. He made it easy. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. "Dancing with me, defending me. You don't know anything about me. I know enough." His thumb traced a small circle against her waist, and Sarah felt the touch all the way to her bones. "I know that your father treats you as a servant in your own home. I know that his wife and daughter see you as less than nothing. I know that despite all of that, you walked into this room with your head high and your spine straight. Maybe I'm just stupid. Courage and stupidity often look the same from the outside. The difference is in the motivation." He studied her face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable. "Why did you come tonight, Sarah?" The truth. She could have lied. Could have given him some polished answer about family duty or wanting to meet the king. But something in his eyes made honesty feel like the only option. "My father sent me 1 gold coin to buy a dress." An insult, meant to ensure I'd show up looking like the charity case he planned to present me as. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I was going to wear my servant's clothes. Show everyone exactly how he's treated me. But then, the seamstress in the village. She knew my mother. She'd been holding onto this fabric for over 20 years, waiting." Sarah's hand unconsciously smoothed the silver silk at her waist. "My mother ordered it for her wedding dress. Before what?" The question was gentle, but Sarah heard something else beneath it. Something urgent. "Before she died, giving birth to me." The old pain was duller now, smoothed by years of acceptance. She was a servant. "My father," Sarah corrected herself. "Alpha Ashford had an affair with her. When she got pregnant, he married Victoria instead. The legitimate choice. The political choice." The king had stopped dancing. They stood in the middle of the floor, still holding each other, while the music played on around them. His expression had gone very still. "Who told you this?" "Everyone. Victoria, mostly. She likes to remind me that my mother was a whore who trapped an alpha with a pregnancy. That I'm lucky to have a roof over my head instead of being thrown out with the garbage." "And your father? What does he say?" Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My father doesn't say anything. He pretends I don't exist. 23 years. And I can count on one hand the number of times he's spoken directly to me." Something shifted in the king's face. The stillness cracked, revealing something that looked almost like rage, but not directed at her. His hand at her waist tightened fractionally before he deliberately relaxed it. "The servants," he said carefully. "The ones who knew your mother. What did they tell you about her? About how she and your father met?" Sarah frowned at the question. "Just that she was kind, beautiful. That she came from a small village in the Northern Territories and got a position in the Ashford household when she was young. Nothing else? Nothing about." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "About the nature of their relationship." "What do you mean?" The king glanced around the ballroom. Sarah followed his gaze and saw what he saw. Dozens of wolves pretending not to watch them, ears straining for any snippet of conversation. Her father standing rigid near the refreshment table, Victoria whispering furiously in his ear, Lydia surrounded by a cluster of young nobles, her false laughter carrying across the room. "Not here," the king said quietly. "Will you walk with me? The gardens should be private." It was an outrageous request. An unmarried Omega, alone in the gardens with the Alpha King? The scandal would fuel gossip for months. But Sarah's wolf was practically vibrating with the need to follow him, to be close to him, to understand the strange connection humming between them. "Yes," she said. He didn't let go of her hand as he led her through a side door and into the cool night air. The gardens of the Ashford estate were famous throughout the territories. Acres of manicured hedges, flowering trees, and fountains that caught the moonlight like scattered diamonds. Sarah had only ever seen them from the windows of the servants' quarters, a beautiful world just out of reach. Now she walked through them with a king at her side, her mother's dress trailing across stone pathways she'd never been allowed to touch. "I need to ask you something," the king said once they were deep enough in the gardens that the ballroom was just a glow on the horizon. And I need you to think carefully before you answer. Sarah nodded, suddenly nervous. Your mother's village. In the Northern Territories. Do you know which one? Silver Pine. At least that's what Agnes told me once. Why? The king's jaw tightened. Because Silver Pine is part of my family's ancestral lands. And 24 years ago, a young woman from that village disappeared. A young woman who was supposed to be presented at the autumn gathering as a potential mate for the alpha heirs. Sarah's heart stuttered. I don't understand. The records were sealed. I only learned of it recently, when I began reviewing old files in preparation for finding my own mate. He turned to face her fully, and in the moonlight, his eyes were pure gold. The young woman's name was Elena. She vanished the night before the gathering and was never seen again. Her family believed she'd been taken, kidnapped. My mother's name was Elena, Sarah whispered. I know. The king's voice was rough. And there's something else. Something about how she and your father truly met. How do you know any of this? Because I sent investigators ahead before the summit. To every territory I planned to visit. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with devastating gentleness. I knew something was wrong in the Crescent Moon Pack. The whispers about a hidden daughter. The servants who would only speak in code. I came here looking for answers. And did you find them? Some. His hand lingered at her jaw. Sarah, your mother wasn't your father's mistress. She was his mate. His true, fated mate. The world tilted. No. Sarah shook her head, stepping back. That's not. Victoria is his Luna. They've been bonded for over 20 years. A chosen bond. Political. Advantageous. The king's voice was steady, relentless. But before Victoria there was Elena. The bond was formed in secret. Your father was young, already promised to the Blackwood family's daughter. When he realized what he'd done, that he'd bonded with a servant girl from the Northern Territories, he panicked. You're lying. I'm not. He caught her hands when she tried to turn away, holding her firmly but not painfully. The investigators found witnesses, servants who were there that night. They saw the bond mark form. They saw your father realize what had happened, and they saw him reject the bond the very next day. Sarah's chest was caving in. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Everything she'd believed about herself, about her place in the world, was crumbling like ash. Rejecting a fated bond doesn't break it, she managed. It just damages it, weakens both wolves. And if one of them is pregnant when the rejection happens, the king's voice gentled, can be fatal. Her mother hadn't died in childbirth. Her mother had died of a broken bond. He killed her. The words came out flat, dead. My father rejected his mate while she was carrying me, and it killed her. Sarah. She was his mate. The grief hit like a physical blow. 18 years of loss suddenly sharpened to an unbearable point. Not his mistress, not his shame, his mate, and he threw her away for what? Politics? Power? For the Blackwood Alliance? For Victoria's dowry? For territory? The king's thumbs traced circles on the backs of her hands. He chose ambition over fate, and your mother paid the price. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, but she couldn't feel them. All she could feel was the howling void where her wolf should be. Her wolf, who had been quiet her whole life, suppressed by grief she hadn't even known she was carrying. Does he know? She asked. That I know. No. And therein lies my dilemma. The king released one of her hands to cup her face, wiping her tears with his thumb. If I expose this now, tonight, it will destroy him politically. Every alpha in that ballroom will turn on him for what he did. Mate rejection isn't just cruel. It's considered an abomination. He would lose everything. Good. The word came out savage. He deserves to lose everything. Perhaps. But it would also paint a target on your back. The king's eyes searched hers. You would be the proof of his crime. The living evidence of his greatest shame. There are those who would see you dead rather than allow that truth to spread. So what are you suggesting? That I stay silent? That I let him keep treating me like garbage while? I'm suggesting that we proceed carefully. His voice dropped. I'm suggesting that I take you back to the capital, under my protection, where I can investigate fully, build an irrefutable case, and ensure that when the truth comes out, you're untouchable. Sarah stared at him. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. The gold in his eyes flared, and his wolf rose close enough to the surface that she could almost see it looking back at her. I know exactly who you are, he said roughly. I knew the moment you walked through those doors. Mate, the word thundered through her again, and this time she understood. You felt it too, she breathed. From the first second. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. You're my mate, Sarah, my true fated mate. And I will burn this entire kingdom to the ground before I let anyone hurt you again. The doors to the garden burst open. There you are. Victoria's voice shattered the moment like breaking glass. Your Majesty, I must apologize for my stepdaughter's behavior. She's not well, prone to delusions. If you'll just let me take her back inside. You will do no such thing. The Alpha King straightened, putting his body between Sarah and her stepmother. When he spoke again, his voice carried the full weight of his power. Lady Sarah will be returning to the capital with me, immediately, as my honored guest and under my personal protection. Victoria's face went white. You can't. I am the Alpha King. He smiled, and it was not a kind smile. I can do whatever I wish. He turned back to Sarah and offered his hand once more. Come with me, he said, and I promise you, everything they've stolen from you, everything they've taken and twisted and destroyed, I will see it returned. Every last piece. Sarah looked at his hand, then at Victoria's furious face, then at the ballroom glowing in the distance, where her father waited with his political machinations and her sister sharpened her cruel smiles. She thought of her mother, of silver fabric and secret bonds, of a love story that had been deliberately erased. She took the king's hand. Take me home, she said. And for the first time in her life, she meant somewhere other than the servants' quarters. Chapter 3. The royal palace rose from the mountains like a crown of stone and starlight. Marcus Thorne had walked its halls for 15 years, first as a soldier, then as spymaster to the crown. He'd seen plots unravel and dynasties fall. He'd watched men lie with such conviction they almost believed themselves. But he'd never seen his king like this. Kalen stood at the war room's window, staring out at the moonlit peaks with the focused intensity of a predator tracking prey. He hadn't moved in 20 minutes, hadn't spoken in 30. The tension rolling off him was enough to make lesser wolves cower. Your Majesty. Marcus set the folder on the table between them. The Ashford investigation. You're not going to like what I found. I stopped liking anything about this situation the moment I saw him grab her arm. Kalen turned, and Marcus noted the gold still flickering in his king's eyes. The wolf was close tonight. Too close. What did you find? I started with Elena, the mother. Marcus flipped open the folder, revealing yellowed documents and faded photographs. Your instincts were right. She wasn't a common servant. She was Lady Elena Ravencrest, only daughter of Alpha Corwin Ravencrest of the Northern Peaks Pack. Kalen went very still. The Ravencrests were wiped out. 23 years ago. The official story is that rogues attacked during the winter solstice, killed the entire family, burned the main house to the ground. Marcus pulled out a map, its edges browned with age. But I've been digging. The attack happened 3 months after Elena supposedly disappeared to take a servant position with the Ashfords. She didn't disappear. No, she was taken. Marcus let that land before continuing. I found a survivor, an old woman named Hilda who was a kitchen maid at the Ravencrest estate. She's been living in a remote village for 2 decades, terrified that someone would come looking for her. What did she tell you? That Elena was promised to an alpha heir from the Eastern Territories. Prestigious match. But before the bonding ceremony could take place, she went to a regional gathering and met a young alpha named Dominic Ashford. Marcus's jaw tightened. According to Hilda, it was a fated bond. Immediate. Undeniable. Elena was over the moon. She'd found her true mate. And Dominic? Panicked. He was already negotiating a marriage contract with the Blackwood family. Victoria's dowry would triple his territory. Her father's political connections would secure his position as alpha. Marcus shook his head. A fated bond with the daughter of a northern alpha, even a powerful one, wouldn't serve his ambitions. Kaelin's hands curled into fists. So he rejected her. Not immediately. From what Hilda gathered, he convinced Elena to keep the bond secret. Promised her he'd find a way to break his engagement. That they'd be together. The disgust in Marcus's voice was palpable. She believed him, trusted him, and 3 months later, she was pregnant. The growl that rumbled from Kaelin's chest made the candles flicker. That's when Dominic made his choice, Marcus continued. He rejected the bond. Formally, deliberately, knowing what it would do to Elena, knowing she was carrying his child. Then he shipped her off to the Ashford estate as a servant, hidden away where no one from her old life would find her. And the Ravencrests? Her family? Marcus pulled out another document, this one newer, compiled from his investigation. They came looking. Alpha Corwin had been searching for his daughter for months. When he finally traced her to Crescent Moon, he demanded an audience with Dominic. Let me guess, he never made it home. The rogue attack happened 2 weeks later. Marcus met his king's eyes. It wasn't rogues. I found a mercenary in a border prison who was part of the strike team. He was young then, barely more than a pup. He's been rotting in a cell for 15 years on an unrelated charge. But for the right price, he talked. Dominic hired them, paid for with Blackwood gold. Victoria's family funded the massacre that wiped out Elena's bloodline. Marcus pulled out a final document. This is the part that changes everything. Elena's parents had already filed her mating documentation with the Northern Council before she disappeared. They recognized the bond as valid and legally binding under the old laws. Kaelin snatched the paper, his eyes scanning the faded text. This says that Elena Ravencrest was Dominic Ashford's legal mate, that any offspring from that union would be legitimate heirs to both the Ravencrest and Ashford lines. Marcus let out a breath. Sarah isn't a bastard, Your Majesty. She's not a shameful secret or a charity case. She's the rightful alpha heir of Crescent Moon Pack. And if the Ravencrests hadn't been murdered, she'd be one of the most powerful women in the Northern Territories. The silence stretched. Kaelin stared at the document, his wolf pacing furiously beneath his skin. His mate, his fated mate, not just mistreated, robbed of her entire birthright. Her family slaughtered. Her mother murdered slowly through bond rejection. Her existence erased and rewritten as something shameful. Where is she now? The words came out rough, barely human. Marcus hesitated. That's the other thing I need to tell you. My contact at Crescent Moon sent word an hour ago. After you left the summit, Dominic. The door to the war room burst open. A young messenger stumbled in, face pale with terror. Your Majesty. The boy could barely breathe. Message from Crescent Moon. Urgent. The Omega. The one you danced with. Kaelin crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbing the scroll from the messenger's trembling hands. His eyes moved across the hastily scrawled words. Then he went utterly, terrifyingly still. Ready my horse, he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that came before hurricanes. Now. Marcus was already moving. How many guards? None. I travel faster alone. Kaelin. The king turned, and his eyes were pure gold. His wolf so close to the surface that his features seemed to blur between man and beast. He put her in chains, Marcus. He beat her and locked her in a cellar like an animal. The words were barely intelligible through the growl. I will burn Crescent Moon to ash before sunrise. And if anyone tries to stop me, I'll start with them. He was out the door before Marcus could respond. The cellar was cold. Sarah had lost track of how long she'd been down here. The darkness was absolute, broken only by thin slivers of moonlight through the cracks in the wooden doors above her head. She couldn't see the chains on her wrists, but she could feel them. Iron links that burned against her skin with every movement. Her wolf should have been howling, should have been fighting, but the creature inside her had gone quiet hours ago, retreating to some deep place where the pain couldn't reach her. This is what death feels like, Sarah thought distantly. Not dramatic, not tragic, just cold and dark and lonely. The beating had been almost perfunctory. Her father hadn't even bothered to do it himself. He'd ordered 2 of his enforcers to handle the discipline while he watched from the cellar stairs. Victoria had been there too, smiling her cold smile, offering suggestions on where the blows would hurt most without leaving visible marks. Only Lydia had been absent. Sarah wondered if her half-sister was celebrating, probably planning which of Sarah's few possessions she'd claim once the labor camp hauled her away. The labor camps. That's where they were sending her. Some brutal outpost in the outer territories where unwanted omegas were worked until they died or went mad. Victoria had explained it in loving detail, crouching down to whisper in Sarah's ear while she lay bleeding on the cellar floor. No one will ask questions. No one will come looking. You'll just disappear. The way you should have disappeared 23 years ago. 23 years. Her whole life, spent as a ghost in her own home. And now she would die as one, in some frozen wasteland, and no one would mourn her. Except, Sarah closed her eyes and let herself think about it. About him, the Alpha King with his golden eyes and his impossible claims. His hand at her waist, his thumb brushing away her tears. The way he'd looked at her like she was something precious instead of something shameful. You're my mate, my true fated mate. Had he meant it, or was it just another cruelty? A brief glimpse of something beautiful before reality came crashing back? It didn't matter. He was far away in his palace, probably already forgetting about the Omega in the silver dress. Why would he remember? She was no one, nothing, just another sad story in a world full of them. A sound broke through her haze. Footsteps, multiple sets moving across the floor above her. Your Majesty, please. That was her father's voice, stripped of its usual arrogance. He sounded panicked. This is a private pack matter. You have no authority. I have every authority. The second voice made Sarah's heart stutter. Deep, resonant, vibrating with barely controlled rage. The old laws grant the crown right of search in any territory where royal safety is threatened. You will stand aside, or I will move you. Royal safety? What threat could possibly? The threat I perceived when my mate vanished from your pack without a trace. The cellar went silent. Sarah couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. He was here. He was here and he'd called her. Mate? Victoria's voice, shrill with disbelief. That Omega slut is not your. The crash that followed shook dust from the cellar rafters. Someone had been thrown into something. Hard. Where is she? The Alpha King's voice had dropped to something barely human. I will not ask again. She left. Dominic, desperate now. After your dance, she was overcome with embarrassment. She ran off into the night. We've had search parties looking for her for days. Liar. The word was a death sentence. Sarah heard movement, heard her father's strangled gasp. Your scent is all over this building. So is hers. And so is blood. A pause. Her blood. I can smell it. The girl is troubled. She hurts herself. We've tried to help her. But, more crashing. More screams. Sarah curled into herself, confused and terrified and desperately hoping. He couldn't really be here. This had to be a fever dream, her dying mind conjuring false comfort. Then the cellar doors exploded inward. Moonlight flooded the darkness, blinding after so many hours in the black. Sarah threw up her hands, or tried to, before the chains caught and sent fresh agony shooting through her wrists. The figure dropped through the opening, landing in a crouch, rising slowly, silhouetted against the stars. And then he saw her. The sound that tore from the Alpha King's throat was inhuman. Pure wolf. Pure rage. The gold of his eyes blazed like twin suns in the darkness as he took in the chains, the blood, the way she lay curled against the cold stone floor. Sarah. Her name was barely a rasp. He was at her side in an instant, his hands hovering over her like he was afraid to touch. Sarah, I'm here. You're safe. I've got you. You came back. Her voice didn't sound like hers, cracked and broken. I didn't think anyone would. I will always come for you. His fingers found the chains, and she heard metal groan as he wrenched the links apart with his bare hands. Always. Do you understand me? Always. The chains fell away. Sarah collapsed against him, and his arms came around her with infinite gentleness, cradling her against his chest like something infinitely precious. I'm going to kill him. The words were spoken directly into her hair, calm and conversational and absolutely sincere. I'm going to tear him apart with my bare hands. Kaelin. He put you in chains. The king's body was trembling with the effort of containing his wolf. He beat you. He left you to die in the dark. There's something else. Sarah's hand found his arm, gripping weakly. There's a box, somewhere down here. I saw them hide it after. She couldn't finish, but Kaelin understood. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, so tender it made her want to weep, then carefully laid her back against the stones. Don't move. I need to look. The cellar wasn't large. Even in the near darkness, it only took Kaelin a few minutes to search. Sarah watched his silhouette move through the shadows, heard him shifting crates and tearing open chests. Then he went still. What is it? Sarah tried to push herself up, wincing at the pain that shot through her ribs. Kaelin didn't answer. He was holding something. A small wooden box, ornate with age. His hands moved over it, finding some hidden mechanism. The lid clicked open. For a long moment, he simply stared at whatever was inside. Kaelin. What? He was back at her side in an instant, the box clutched in one hand. His expression was strange, grief and triumph and something that looked almost like reverence. This is mating documentation, he said quietly. Official. Sealed by the Northern Council 24 years ago. Sarah's heart stopped. My mother's. Your mother was Lady Elena Ravencrest, daughter of Alpha Corwin Ravencrest of the Northern Peaks Pack. Kaelin's voice was rough. She was your father's true mate, legally bonded. And this? He held up a smaller document from inside the box. This is her family's claim registration for any offspring of the Union. Sarah shook her head, not understanding. You're not illegitimate, Kaelin said. You never were. Under the old laws, a mated bond supersedes any subsequent political marriage. Victoria was never Dominic's true Luna. Lydia was never his legitimate heir. His golden eyes met hers. You are. You're the rightful alpha heir of Crescent Moon Pack. The words washed over her. Impossible. Incomprehensible. That can't be right. I'm an Omega. You are Lady Sarah Ravencrest Ashford. Your mother's people were slaughtered to hide the truth. Your father buried you in a servant's role to erase your claim. But he kept the documentation. Kaelin's jaw tightened. Either for blackmail or for insurance. Either way, it doesn't matter now. Why? The question felt stupid, but Sarah couldn't stop it. Why would he do all this? Destroy my mother's family. Hide the bond. Treat me like garbage for 20 years. Because the Blackwood Alliance was worth more to him than his own mate. Than his own child. Kaelin carefully tucked the box into his coat, then gathered Sarah back into his arms. Can you stand? I'm taking you out of here. Taking me where? To the palace. Under my protection. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, and Sarah felt her wolf stir for the first time in hours, responding to his proximity. No one will ever hurt you again. I swear it on my crown and my life. Sarah should have argued, should have demanded answers to the 1,000 questions spinning through her head. But she was tired, so tired, and his arms felt like the safest place in the world. "I don't understand," she whispered as he carried her toward the shattered cellar doors. "Why do you care? You're a king. I'm nobody. Why would you risk a political crisis for someone like me?" Kalen paused at the base of the stairs. Above them, Sarah could hear shouting guards, servants, her father's enraged protests. "You keep saying that," the king murmured, his eyes searching her face. "That you're nobody, that you're nothing, but you're wrong." He pressed his forehead to hers, the same gesture from the garden, intimate and overwhelming. "You are everything, Sarah. My mate, my match, the other half of my soul, and I would burn the entire world to keep you safe." He carried her up the stairs and into the chaos above. Sarah saw it all through a haze. Her father restrained by royal guards, blood running from a cut on his temple. Victoria unconscious on the floor. Lydia nowhere to be seen. Servants pressing against the walls, their faces mixtures of fear and hope. And through it all, the Alpha King held her against his chest, his wolf humming with protective fury, his heart beating steady beneath her ear. She still didn't trust him, didn't understand why fate had thrown them together or what it would mean, didn't know if the bond she could feel forming between them was salvation or just another kind of trap. But as he carried her out of the only home she'd ever known and into the waiting night, Sarah made herself a promise. She would find the truth. All of it. About her mother, her father, her stolen heritage. And when she did, everyone who had taken from her would pay. The Alpha King set her on his horse and swung up behind her, his arms creating a warm cage around her battered body. "Hold on to me," he said. Sarah wrapped her fingers in his cloak, and they rode toward the mountains, toward the palace, toward a future she couldn't yet imagine. Behind them, crescent moon burned in the pre-dawn light. Not literally, not yet, but Sarah could feel the destruction coming. The old lies were crumbling, the old powers were shifting, and she was at the center of it all. An Omega in chains becoming something else entirely. Something dangerous, something free. Chapter 4. The palace was too soft. Sarah woke every morning in silk sheets, surrounded by pillows that cost more than a year of her servants' wages. Breakfast arrived on silver trays. Handmaidens hovered, ready to draw baths and lay out gowns and brush her hair until it shone like polished mahogany. It was suffocating. 2 weeks. 2 weeks since Kalen had carried her out of the cellar and into this gilded prison. 2 weeks of gentle questions she couldn't answer and careful kindnesses that made her skin itch with suspicion. What did he want? Kings didn't rescue Omegas out of the goodness of their hearts. They didn't install them in the finest guest chambers and assign them personal guards and send doctors to tend wounds that should have been left to fester. There was a price. There was always a price. Sarah just hadn't figured out what it was yet. A knock at her door made her flinch. 2 weeks, and she still flinched at every sound. "My lady." The voice belonged to Marin, the head handmaiden. "The king requests your presence in the training yard." The training yard. Another of Kalen's inexplicable gifts. When Sarah had admitted she'd never been taught to fight, that Omegas at Crescent Moon weren't permitted weapons or combat training, he'd simply nodded and assigned her a rotation with the palace guards. "The ability to defend yourself isn't a privilege," he'd said, golden eyes unreadable. "It's a right." Pretty words. Sarah had stopped believing in pretty words years ago, but she went to the training yard anyway. Went every day, in fact, because for 1 hour each morning, she could stop thinking. Stop waiting for the trap to spring. Stop wondering what Kalen truly wanted from her. For 1 hour, she could just fight. Commander Thorne was waiting for her. The spymaster had taken over her training personally after the first week, when she dislocated a guard's shoulder during a sparring session. At the time, Sarah had been horrified, certain she'd be punished for injuring one of the king's men. Instead, Thorne had watched her with narrowed eyes and said, "Again." Now he circled her in the morning sunlight, wooden practice sword balanced loosely in his grip. "Your footwork is improving. Your compliments are overwhelming." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. Sarcasm. Good. That means you're not afraid of me anymore. I'm not afraid of you. Sarah shifted her weight, tracking his movements. I'm afraid of what happens when you stop being useful to your king. The smile vanished. Thorn stopped circling. Is that what you think this is? That Kalen is using you for some purpose, and when that purpose is fulfilled, I don't think anything. I'm waiting to see. Sarah raised her practice sword. Are we training or talking? Thorn didn't move. His dark eyes studied her with an intensity that reminded her uncomfortably of his king. You've been waiting your whole life, he said quietly. Waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the kindness to turn cruel, for the safety to become a trap. I understand. Given what you've survived, I'd be suspicious too. Then you understand why I'm not going to let my guard down. I do, but I also need you to understand something. Thorn stepped closer, his voice dropping. Kalen is many things. He's ruthless when he needs to be, calculating, capable of a cold fury that makes seasoned warriors tremble. But he has never, not once in the 15 years I've served him, hurt someone who didn't deserve it. People don't always hurt you with fists. No, they don't. Thorn's expression shifted. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. You're smarter than they gave you credit for, aren't you? Those people who kept you in servant's clothes and told you that you were nothing. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. Very well. Thorn raised his sword. Let's see if you can actually land a hit today. They trained for an hour. By the end, Sarah was drenched in sweat and sporting a collection of bruises that would bloom spectacularly by evening. But she'd also driven Thorn back twice. Once with a combination she'd invented on the spot, once with sheer stubborn aggression. Better, Thorn admitted, barely winded. Your instincts are sound, but you're still holding back. I'm not. You're Wolf. He cut her off, sheathing his practice sword. She's awake now. I can see her in your eyes when you fight. But you keep pulling her back, keeping her leashed. Sarah's jaw tightened. Her wolf had been stirring for days now, growing stronger since she'd arrived at the palace. For years, the creature had been nearly dormant. A faint whisper in the back of her mind that she'd learned to ignore. But something had changed. The bond, maybe, or simply being away from the constant suppression of Crescent Moon. Whatever the cause, her wolf was waking up. And she was hungry. Control is important, Sarah said carefully. Control is essential. But so is power. Thorn picked up a water skin and tossed it to her. You have more of it than you realize. The question is whether you'll learn to use it before someone uses it against you. Before she could ask what that meant, a young guard came running across the yard. Commander, the king requests your presence in the throne room. Immediately, Thorn's expression shuddered. What's happened? Visitors, sir. From Crescent Moon Pack. The guard's eyes flicked to Sarah. Lady Lydia Ashford has arrived. She's requesting an audience with His Majesty. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She should have stayed away. That's what the sensible part of her brain kept screaming as she made her way through the palace corridors. Lydia's presence meant trouble. Meant Victoria's scheming had reached all the way to the capital. Whatever her half-sister wanted, it couldn't be good. But the wolf part of her, that newly awakened creature prowling beneath her skin, demanded she witness it. Demanded she see her enemy on her territory. Her territory. When had she started thinking of the palace that way? The throne room doors stood open. Sarah slipped inside, staying close to the wall, hidden among the gathered courtiers. She was dressed in simple training clothes, her hair still damp with sweat. No one would expect the king's honored guest to be lurking in the shadows like a servant. Old habits. Lydia stood at the center of the room, and Sarah had to admit her half-sister looked stunning. A gown of deep crimson hugged her curves, cut low enough to be scandalous, high enough to be technically acceptable. Diamonds glittered at her throat. Her golden hair was arranged in an elaborate cascade that must have taken hours to perfect. She looked like a queen. She looked like she knew it. Your Majesty. Lydia's curtsy was a masterpiece of calculated seduction, bending just enough to offer a generous view of her cleavage. Thank you for receiving me. I know my family is out of favor at the moment. Kalen sat on his throne, expression carved from granite. He'd been cold since Sarah arrived at the palace. Not to her, but to everyone else. The warm man who'd danced with her, who'd carried her from the cellar with such tenderness, seemed to have vanished. In his place was the Alpha King. Remote, terrifying, absolute. Your father is in my dungeons awaiting trial for mate rejection, conspiracy to commit murder, and the massacre of the Ravencrest bloodline, Kalen said flatly. Your mother is confined to Crescent Moon under house arrest. Out of favor seems a generous description. Lydia's smile never wavered. My parents' sins are not my own, Your Majesty. I'm here to offer my sincere apologies for any misunderstandings, and to present myself as a gesture of goodwill. Present yourself? The Ashford family has always valued our relationship with the crown. Lydia stepped closer to the throne, her hips swaying with practiced grace. I thought perhaps, given recent events, Your Majesty might appreciate having an Ashford who is properly devoted to his interests. Sarah's wolf snarled. The sound was internal, but she felt it reverberate through her bones. Her vision sharpened. Her skin prickled with the urge to shift. She'd never felt this before. This possessive fury, this overwhelming need to stake a claim. Mine, her wolf growled. He is mine. Kalen's eyes flickered toward the shadows where Sarah stood, just for an instant, before returning to Lydia. Had he heard? Could he sense her wolf's response through whatever bond stretched between them? I have no need of Ashford devotion, he said coolly. What I need is justice. Your father's trial will proceed. Of course, I would never dream of interfering with justice. Lydia had reached the base of the throne now. She reached out, her manicured fingers hovering over Kalen's armrest. I merely thought Your Majesty might appreciate some comfort during such trying times. Her hand touched his arm. Sarah's wolf exploded. Later, she wouldn't remember moving, wouldn't remember the scream that tore from her throat or the way the courtiers scrambled back. She would only remember the feeling. The power surging through her veins like liquid fire, the shift beginning before she could stop it. Her hands became claws. Fur rippled across her forearms. Her eyes, she knew without seeing, had gone pure gold. She was caught between forms, half woman, half wolf, in a partial shift that only the strongest alphas could achieve. And she was stalking toward Lydia with murder in her heart. Stop! The word wasn't spoken. It was commanded, and every wolf in the room obeyed. Dropping to their knees, heads bowed, bodies locked in place by a power that transcended physical force. Even Lydia, the perfect seductress, crumpled like a puppet with cut strings, her face pressed to the marble floor. Only Kalen remained standing. He stepped down from his throne, moving slowly, hands raised in a gesture of peace. His eyes never left Sarah's. Sarah. His voice was different now, gentle. The voice from the cellar, from the garden. Come back to me. She couldn't. The wolf was too strong, too angry, too hungry for blood. 23 years of rage was pouring through her, demanding release. She touched you. The words came out distorted, more growl than speech. She touched what's mine. The throne room went utterly silent. The partial shift, the possessive claim, the power that had dropped a room full of wolves to their knees. There was no hiding the truth now. Kalen took another step closer. Yes, yours. I am yours, Sarah, and you are mine. But I need you to come back now. I need you to let the wolf rest. Why should I? She deserves. She deserves nothing. His hands cupped her face, her partially shifted, monstrous face, with devastating tenderness. But you deserve better than blood on your hands. You deserve to choose your revenge with a clear mind, not in the grip of a fury you can't control. The wolf hesitated, challenged. But Kalen's eyes held hers, gold meeting gold, and Sarah felt the bond between them pulse with something that felt terrifyingly like love. Slowly, agonizingly, she pulled herself back. The claws retracted, the fur receded. She stood in the middle of the throne room, shaking and human and more exposed than she'd ever been in her life. Kalen's arms came around her, and she let them. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his chest. "I couldn't stop it. When she touched you, You have nothing to apologize for." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, then turned to address the stunned court. His voice carried the full weight of royal authority. "Lady Sarah Ravencrest is my fated mate. Any who doubt it have just witnessed proof. She is under my protection, and any threat against her will be treated as a threat against the crown." Whispers erupted. Lydia, still on her knees, looked up with an expression of pure hatred. But beneath the chaos, Sarah heard one voice, quiet, cold, and utterly chilling. "Ravencrest." Well, she turned her head. A man stood near the throne room's side entrance. Older, silver-haired, with a face that might have been handsome before cruelty carved permanent lines into it. His eyes were fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her wolf growl in warning. "Lord Varon." Kalen's voice dropped several degrees. "You have something to say?" "Only that your majesty has chosen an interesting mate." Varon smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. The Ravencrest line was believed to be extinct. How fascinating that a survivor has emerged. And with the bloodline gift, no less. "You know of the gift?" "I know many things about the Ravencrest family." Varon's gaze never left Sarah's face. "I knew Alpha Corwin quite well once upon a time, before his unfortunate demise." Ice crept down Sarah's spine. There was something in his voice. Something that suggested he'd known more than her mother's father, that he'd had a hand in whatever unfortunate demise had befallen him. Kalen stepped between them, blocking Sarah from Varon's view. "This audience is concluded. Lady Lydia, you will return to Crescent Moon immediately. Lord Varon, we will discuss your comments later. In private." Varon bowed, still smiling that cold smile. "Of course, Your Majesty. I look forward to it." He left. But as the throne room emptied and the whispers faded, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something had just begun. Something dangerous. They didn't speak until they reached Kalen's private chambers. Sarah stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, staring out at the mountain peaks. Her wolf had settled, but the adrenaline still hummed through her system. The partial shift, the power, the way every wolf in that room had dropped to their knees at her command. What was she becoming? "You're frightened." Kalen's voice came from behind her, not accusing, just observing. "I almost killed her. You almost lost control. There's a difference." "Is there?" Sarah turned to face him. "I've never felt anything like that before. When she touched you, it was like something inside me snapped. I wanted to tear her apart." The mate bond can be intense, especially when it's new, especially when it's been suppressed. Kalen moved closer but didn't touch her, giving her space. "Your wolf recognized me as hers from the moment we met, but you've been fighting it, questioning it, and the wolf doesn't understand questions." "I'm not fighting it. I'm trying to understand it." "What's the difference?" Sarah laughed. A broken, exhausted sound. "The difference is that I need to know if this is real, if you're real, or if I'm just trading one cage for another." Kalen was quiet for a long moment. "I could have told you about the bond the night we met," he finally said. "In the garden, when I first felt it pull between us. But I didn't." "Why?" "Because I didn't want you to feel trapped." His golden eyes met hers, and for the first time since she'd arrived at the palace, she saw vulnerability there. "Fate chose us for each other, but fate doesn't get to decide everything. I wanted you to have the choice, Sarah. The choice that was taken from your mother." Sarah's throat tightened. "My mother didn't get to choose." "No. Your father forced a bond and then destroyed her for it." "I won't." His voice cracked, just slightly. "I will never force you into anything. If you want to reject the bond, I'll accept it. It will hurt. It might kill me. But I'll accept it." "Would you really? Let me go." "If that's what you needed to be free, yes." The simple honesty of it broke something open in Sarah's chest. For the first time, she looked at Kaelin, really looked, and saw not a king, not a threat, not another person who wanted to use her. She saw a man who was offering her something she'd never been offered before. A choice. "I don't want to reject it," she whispered. "I don't want to reject you, but I'm scared, Kaelin. I've been hurt so many times. I don't know if I know how to do this, how to trust someone, how to let someone in." He closed the distance between them, his hands gentle on her arms. "Then let me show you, not all at once. Not in a day or a week or a month. Let me earn your trust. Let me prove that this bond is a partnership, not a prison. And if I never fully trust you, then I'll spend the rest of my life trying." His forehead touched hers, that gesture of intimacy that had become theirs. "You're worth it, Sarah. You've always been worth it." She closed her eyes, let herself lean into him, just slightly. Let her wolf rumble with contentment at the nearness of her mate. It wasn't acceptance. Not yet. It wasn't forgiveness for all the ways the world had hurt her. But it was a beginning. "Lord Varen," she said quietly. "He knew something. About my family." "Yes, I saw it too." Kaelin's arms tightened around her. "Marcus will investigate. If Varen was involved in the Ravencrest massacre, he was. I could feel it." Sarah opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with new steel. "He looked at me like he was afraid of something, of what I might become. The bloodline gift. The ability to command wolves." Kaelin nodded slowly. "If you can truly do what you did in the throne room, command any wolf, regardless of rank or pack, you would be one of the most powerful wolves in existence. Is that why everyone keeps calling me powerful? Thorn, even my wolf feels different now. The Ravencrest gift was legendary. Most thought it died with your grandfather." Kaelin's thumb traced her cheekbone. "But it's in you, Sarah. It's been in you all along, buried beneath years of abuse and suppression. Now that you're free, it's waking up." "Yes." Sarah pulled back, just enough to look at the mountains again. Somewhere out there, Lord Varen was plotting. Her half-sister was nursing her humiliation. Her father rotted in a dungeon while her stepmother spread poison. And she, the Omega who'd been told she was nothing, was discovering she might be something terrifying after all. "I want to learn," she said. "The gift. The fighting. All of it. I want to be strong enough that no one can ever chain me again. Then I'll make sure you have every resource you need. And when I'm ready," she turned back to Kaelin, and her eyes flashed gold. "I want justice. For my mother. For my grandparents. For everyone who was destroyed so Dominic Ashford could have his power." The Alpha King smiled. It was not a gentle expression. "My love," he said. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Outside, the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. And deep in the palace, Lord Varen penned a message to Elise he'd kept hidden for 20 years. "The Ravencrest heir lives. She has the gift. She must be eliminated before she discovers the full truth." The game was far from over. It was just beginning. Chapter 5. The mating ceremony was supposed to be beautiful, and it was for exactly 17 minutes. Sarah stood at the altar in the palace's great cathedral, draped in silver and moonstone, watching Kaelin approach through the assembled crowd. Every alpha in the realm had come to witness the bonding of their king to the lost Ravencrest heir. The story had spread like wildfire in the weeks since the diplomatic reception. The hidden daughter, the murdered bloodline, the fated mate who rose from chains to claim a crown. They loved the narrative, the romance of it, the drama. Sarah didn't care about any of that. She cared about the man walking toward her, golden eyes soft with emotion, looking at her like she'd hung the moon. "You're staring," she murmured when he reached her side. "You're worth staring at." His hand found hers warm and steady. "Ready to bind my soul to yours for eternity?" She smiled. "I've been ready for weeks. You're the one who insisted on the formal ceremony. The realm needs to see it." needs to know that our bond is witnessed and unbreakable. His thumb traced circles on her palm. And I wanted everyone who ever doubted you to watch you become their queen. The elder officiating the ceremony cleared his throat. If the king and his chosen are prepared, they turned to face him together. The words of the bonding ritual were ancient, passed down through generations of wolf royalty. Sarah repeated them without really hearing them, lost in the intensity of Kaelin's gaze. When the elder called for blood, traditional, a mixing of essences to seal the bond, Kaelin drew a small blade across his palm without hesitation. Sarah did the same. Their hands pressed together, blood mingling. The mate bond flared between them, golden and overwhelming, no longer dormant but fully alive. Sarah gasped as power rushed through her veins, as her wolf rose to meet his, as something ancient and eternal clicked into place. By blood and bond, by moon and... The arrow came from nowhere. It struck Sarah in the shoulder, spinning her away from Kaelin. She heard screaming. The crowd, the guards, her own voice. The pain was immediate and blinding, but worse than the pain was the burning. The arrow was coated in something that spread through her blood like liquid fire. Sarah! Kaelin's voice, raw with terror, his arms catching her as she fell, his hands pressing against the wound, coming away black with poison. Wolfsbane! Someone shouted. The arrow was laced with wolfsbane. Chaos erupted. Guards swarming the cathedral, searching for the assassin. Nobles screaming and trampling each other in their rush to escape. And Sarah, lying in Kaelin's arms, feeling her heart slow with every beat. Stay with me. He was cradling her against his chest, his face a mask of desperation. Sarah, stay with me. I'm not losing you. I'm not. The bond. She managed through the fire in her veins. Complete. The bond. What? Your blood. The elder was suddenly there, ancient face grim. The mating ritual was interrupted before completion. If you give her more of your blood, freely given, willingly accepted, the bond might stabilize her. Might give her wolf the strength to fight the poison. Might. There are no guarantees with wolfsbane, but it's her only chance. Kaelin didn't hesitate. He tore open the wound on his palm, letting fresh blood flow, and pressed it to Sarah's lips. Drink, he commanded. Please. Sarah, please. She drank. The world exploded into light. Sarah woke to silence. She was lying in her chambers at the palace, sunlight streaming through the windows. Her body felt strange. Not wrong exactly, but different. Stronger. Sharper. Like every cell had been rewritten. You're awake. She turned her head. Kaelin sat in a chair beside her bed, dark circles under his eyes. His clothes rumpled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. How long? Her voice came out rough. 3 days. He reached for her hand, and she felt the mate bond pulse between them. Fully formed now, unbreakable. The healers said you would live, but they didn't know when you'd wake, or if you'd be different. Different how? The blood exchange, the trauma, the wolfsbane. He squeezed her fingers. Something happened, Sarah. Something changed. She sat up slowly, testing her body. Everything worked. Everything felt fine. Better than fine, actually. She felt powerful in a way she couldn't explain. Show me. Kaelin helped her to her feet, led her to the mirror on the far wall. Sarah stared at her reflection. Her eyes had changed. Still brown, but now shot through with threads of gold, Kaelin's gold. She realized, bleeding through the bond. And there was something else. Something in the way she held herself. Something in the set of her jaw. She looked like a queen. The healers think the blood exchange triggered a full awakening of your Ravencrest abilities, Kaelin said quietly. Your wolf isn't suppressed anymore. It's unleashed. Sarah looked at her hands. They seemed the same, but she could feel the power coiled beneath her skin, waiting, ready. The assassin, she said. Did you catch them? Better. We caught their employer. Kaelin's expression hardened. Lord Varen. He was trying to flee the city when my guards intercepted him. He's been in interrogation ever since. Has he talked? Not yet, but he will. A pause. There's more. Things we've learned. Things you need to hear. Tell me. Kaelin told her everything. About Varen's confession, wrung from him through 3 days of questioning. About how Dominic had hired him 23 years ago to organize the Ravencrest massacre. About how Victoria had known from the beginning, had helped plan it, in fact, trading her family's gold for the elimination of a rival mate. About how they'd all thought the Ravencrest line was dead, until Sarah walked into that summit in her mother's dress. Varen recognized your power at the diplomatic reception, Kaelin said. He knew that if you discovered your full heritage, you'd come for revenge. He couldn't let that happen, so he tried to kill you first. Sarah listened in silence. The rage she expected didn't come. Instead, there was something colder, something patient. The Council of Alphas has been meeting since the attack, Kaelin continued. They're demanding justice. For the assassination attempt, for the Ravencrest massacre, for all of it. What kind of justice? That's your choice. His eyes met hers. You're the last Ravencrest. You're the victim here. The Council has agreed to honor whatever judgment you decide. And my father? Victoria? In custody. Awaiting your verdict. He paused. Sarah, whatever you choose, I'll support you. Mercy or vengeance. It's your call. She looked back at the mirror, at the gold-threaked eyes of a woman she was only beginning to recognize. Then I choose justice, she said, and I'll deliver it myself. Crescent Moon looked different from above. Sarah stood on the hill overlooking her former prison, watching the sun set over the Ashford estate. The last time she'd seen this place, she'd been bleeding in a cellar. Now she was returning as the Alpha King's mate, surrounded by royal guards, with the power of her ancestors singing in her blood. Strange how things changed. Ready? Kaelin asked beside her. No. She started walking anyway. Let's go. The great hall of the Ashford estate had been transformed into a makeshift court. The Council of Alphas sat in judgment along the walls. Representatives from every territory, witnesses to what was about to happen. At the far end of the room, 3 figures waited. Dominic Ashford, Victoria Blackwood Ashford, Lydia Ashford, her family. Sarah walked toward them with her head high, feeling every eye in the room track her movement. She wore no crown, not yet, but the authority radiated from her anyway. The Ravencrest gift, fully awakened. The presence of a natural alpha. Dominic was the first to break. He fell to his knees as she approached, his face a mask of terror and desperate hope. Sarah, please. I never meant. I was young, I was stupid, You rejected your fated mate while she was pregnant with your child. Sarah's voice was calm, cold. You orchestrated the massacre of her entire family. You buried your own daughter in a servant's role and let her be abused for 23 years. She tilted her head. Which part of that didn't you mean? He had no answer. Of course he didn't. Victoria was rigid with fury, even in chains. This is absurd. She's a nobody, a servant. She has no right to judge. Be silent. The command rippled out with the full force of Sarah's awakened power. Victoria's mouth snapped shut. Her eyes went wide with shock and fear. Good, Sarah thought. Let her know what it feels like. Victoria Blackwood Ashford. Sarah turned to face her stepmother fully. You funded the massacre that killed my mother's family. You knew about the rejected bond and used it to secure your own position. You beat me, starved me, and plotted to have me killed. Victoria tried to speak. Couldn't. The command still held. For the crime of conspiracy to commit mass murder, for the crime of attempted murder of the king's mate, you are sentenced to death. Sarah's voice didn't waver. The sentence will be carried out at dawn. Victoria screamed behind sealed lips. Guards dragged her away. Lydia was weeping now, her perfect beauty destroyed by fear and snot. Sarah, please. I didn't know about any of this. I was just doing what Mother told me. I know. Sarah looked at her half-sister, searching for the hatred she'd carried for so long. It wasn't there anymore. Lydia was pathetic, broken, weak. She wasn't worth hating. You're stripped of your title and your claim to the Ashford fortune. You'll be escorted to the border and released. What you do with your life after that is your own concern. Sarah turned away. Don't come back. Lydia collapsed, sobbing. More guards, more dragging. And then there was only Dominic, her father, the man who'd given her life and then spent 23 years pretending she didn't exist, knelt before her with tears streaming down his face. He looked old suddenly, old and afraid and utterly broken. Kill me, he whispered. Please, just end it. Sarah crouched down to meet his eyes. No. What? You want death. You think it's an escape. She smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. I'm not going to give you what you want, Father. I'm going to give you what you gave me. She stood. Dominic Ashford, you are hereby stripped of your alpha title and all associated powers. Your pack lands are forfeit to the crown. Your name is stricken from the Ashford lineage. Her voice rang through the silent hall. You are sentenced to live the rest of your days as a packless Omega. No territory, no status, no protection. You will work as a servant in whatever household will have you, and you will experience every humiliation you forced upon your daughter. Dominic's face went gray. You can't. I can. I am. Sarah leaned close enough to whisper. Live long, Father. Live long and remember what you lost. She straightened and turned to face the Council of Alphas. Lord Varon of the Eastern Council orchestrated the attack on the mating ceremony at Dominic Ashford's request. For conspiracy and attempted regicide, his sentence is death. The executions will proceed at dawn. She paused. Does anyone wish to contest these judgments? Silence. Then justice is served. She walked out of the great hall, Kaelin falling into step beside her. Neither of them spoke until they were outside, standing in the cool night air under a canopy of stars. You didn't kill him, Kaelin said finally. Killing him would have been mercy. Sarah looked up at the moon, feeling its light on her face. He'll spend the rest of his life knowing what he lost, knowing that his victim became his queen. That's worse than death. That's justice. Kaelin's hand found hers. I love you, he said simply. Have I mentioned that? Once or twice. She turned to face him, her wolf settling into contentment at his nearness. I love you too. Even though you're annoyingly noble and overprotective. I'll work on being less noble. Don't you dare. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, under the stars of her former prison. And Sarah let herself feel it. The relief, the triumph, the overwhelming rightness of standing exactly where she was meant to be. The servant had become a queen, and she was only getting started. 3 months later, the coronation was the grandest the realm had ever seen. Every alpha who had watched Sarah in rags at that summit was there to watch her crowned. They stood in the palace cathedral, the same space where she'd nearly died, now transformed with silver and moonlight, and bore witness as Kaelin placed the Luna crown on her head. By blood and bond, he said, his voice carrying through the vast space. By moon and stars, I crown you Sarah Ravencrest Valerius, Luna Queen of the 5 territories. The crown was silver, set with moonstones that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. It was beautiful, but Sarah barely felt its weight. She was too busy looking at her people, the nobles who had once dismissed her, the servants who had once pitied her, the alphas who had once ignored her existence. They all bowed as one, acknowledging her power, her position, her right to rule. She rose from the coronation throne and faced them. I stand before you as proof that fate cannot be buried, she said, her voice strong and clear. That truth cannot be silenced, that the weak can become powerful and the forgotten can rise. She thought of her mother, of Elena, who had loved and lost and died for it, of all the years she'd spent not knowing who she truly was. My first act as Luna Queen is to establish new laws protecting the vulnerable among us. No Omega will be treated as property. No servant will be denied basic dignity. No child will be hidden away in shame for the circumstances of their birth. She met the eyes of the alphas in the crowd, one by one. We are wolves. We are pack. And we are only as strong as our weakest members. The cheering started slowly, then built to a roar. Sarah let it wash over her, feeling the approval of her people, the pride of her mate, the peace of finally being exactly who she was meant to be. Later that night, alone in their chambers, Kaylin held her close and whispered promises against her hair. She fell asleep feeling safe for the first time in her life. She dreamed of silver wolves running under moonlight. She dreamed of her mother, smiling. She dreamed of the future. Epilogue. 6 months later. Sarah knew something was different before the healer confirmed it. Her wolf had been restless for weeks, protective of something she couldn't name. Food tasted strange. Mornings were difficult, and there was a new tenderness in her body that had nothing to do with the mate bond. "Well?" she asked, sitting on the edge of the healer's table. "What's wrong with me?" Helena, the palace's senior healer, smiled. "Nothing is wrong, Your Majesty. Quite the opposite, in fact." "Then why have I been feeling pregnant?" Helena's smile widened. "You're pregnant, my queen. About 8 weeks along, by my estimation." The world tilted. "Pregnant?" Sarah repeated faintly. "There's more." Helena pressed a warm hand to Sarah's stomach. "I sense 2 heartbeats. Twins." Sarah stared at her. Twins. The Ravencrest line was known for them. Strong bloodlines often produce multiple births. Helena patted her hand. "Shall I fetch the king?" Sarah nodded mutely. Kaylin arrived in minutes, clearly having run the entire way. His hair was wild, his shirt half untucked, his eyes blazing with worry. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "I felt something through the bond." Sarah took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "Twins," she said. He went very still. "Twins." The word was barely a whisper. "The Ravencrest bloodline will continue." Sarah felt tears gathering in her eyes. Happy tears. For once. "We're going to be parents, Kaylin." The king of 5 territories, the most powerful wolf in the realm, dropped to his knees. He pressed his forehead to her stomach, his shoulders shaking. Sarah ran her fingers through his hair, feeling the mate bond sing with joy, feeling her wolf curl protectively around the new lives growing inside her. "I love you," he said against her belly. "All of you. All 3 of you. We love you too." Sarah looked out the window at the sun rising over the mountains. The palace spread before her, full of people who respected her, who followed her, who would die for her. Her mate knelt at her feet, overwhelmed with happiness. Her children grew safe inside her. 23 years ago, she'd been born in shame, her mother's dying breath, her father's secret. Now she was Luna Queen, mate, mother. She was Sarah Ravencrest Valerius, and she was finally, irrevocably, gloriously free. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like, and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily, and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.